All right, so I'm talking to Craig Zuger, who's an artist, Western artist in the United States. Western, he lives in the West. He lives in the Willamette. I think that's the Willamette Valley in Oregon. Is that right? The river is the Willamette? Not
Well,
sure.
it's actually us locals would call it the Willamette.
Willamette? That's what they say?
Willamette. Yep.
Way to go! I love that. And it's it's paradise. I think. As far as I know, I've been briefly through there many years ago. I mean, if it's a wonderful place, just a wonderful place to live. Anybody who loves the outdoors and who loves the beauty of the outdoors is going to want to live there. I think that if you want to know it personally, I've looked at some of your art, Craig, on the on the on the websites, and I got to say that I don't know. I think if someone wanted to know what paradise meant, they should look at your art. Because that's what it looks like, as far as I'm concerned. Wow. Anyway, tell me, fine detail, outdoor animals, countryside, wild countryside, just beautiful. Tell me, and you have some acreage there, and you have a family, I guess, that live there with you.
Where I'm
your
at
wife.
Is I'm in the Willamette Valley, just on the fringe of the Coast Range. I live probably about I don't know 50 miles as the crow flies from the Pacific Ocean.
Sure.
And inland a bit. My wife and I live together. We don't have any kids. We have a bunch of animals, and we have 102 acres. It's kind of tucked into this little valley area with a lot of creek runoff and real nice habitat for wildlife. And we've been actually working with the Department of Forestry and with the Federal Fish and Wildlife on a white oak restoration program and preserving the area, which is becoming more and more increasingly rare because of development, that kind of thing.
Sure, of
so
course.
we decided that what we want to do is preserve this area for those native wildflowers,
Yeah.
plant species, and that kind of thing. So,
That's just wonderful. How did you? That's just wonderful, and the art, of course, will help with that when people see it. How yeah. How did you get started? Like, what brought you into painting the way you do?
Well, actually, my interest, I think, started back when I was a little kid, and my mom was kind of a hobby painter. She never did it professionally, but she always enjoyed it. She did a lot of portrait painting, and we'd get a lot of her subject matter from the pages, like National Geographic or, wherever she would find, any portrait image that would kind of move her, and she would paint. So I always had that around me, the smell of oil paint and, the whole thing. So it was always kind of ever present, and I just kind of would watch her, and I thought it looked kind of interesting when I started doing a little painting. I guess before that I was drawing all the time, and then like I said, when she started painting, I became really interested in that process. So that's, I guess, where the beginning interest was.
Did you go in? Did you eventually go in for some formal training of any sort, or?
A little bit. I had some brief college experience, but I didn't really pursue it too much in that. I did, of course, through high school. And,
Sure.
All the the junior high and high school, that kind
Yep.
of thing. A little bit when I had a couple of years in college, and I took a little bit there. But for the most part, it's been, just kind of, I hate to really use the term self-taught, but I educated myself, and
Sure.
I still am. I always will. That's kind of how I think
Of course.
we all
I think everybody at some level does that. All the artists at some point, it becomes a self-education process, I should think.
Yeah, I think so.
You have mentors. Some of the famous old painters in the U.S.
Well, I'll tell you one of the most, I think probably one of the most influential people for me, and I think, and I owe him a lot of credit, is when I started to look at art as a profession. now lives in British Columbia, and before that, he lived here in just outside of or in Salem, Oregon, just outside of where I'm at now. In fact, I lived in Salem when I met Terry, and he was very instrumental in kind of pointing out what is going to be required of me as a professional artist.
Wow.
So I'll always have a level of gratitude.
For sure. That's a wonderful angel to come into your life at the right time.
Oh, no kidding.
Yeah. So, and your medium, from what I gather, is mostly oil and mostly fairly small. Are they canvases or boards that you paint on?
Yeah, I started out actually, again, with, Terry's influence. He was painting solely in acrylic, and that's kind of how I started. And doing very, very, that photorealism. I was doing a lot of birds and kind of emulating what Terry was doing because it was easy to
Sure.
sort of, take what he was telling me and apply it to the same medium. And then as time kind of went on, I got a little bit more, taking kind of the education that I've been getting and, switching over to oil and then becoming, staying representational, but loosening up a little bit. And now, to answer your question, I'm solely oil paint. And my canvases, I've gone up as far as, as large as, what did I do? I did a 40 by 50. That's the biggest I've ever done, but for the most part, the largest ones for me usually don't exceed 24 by 30.
Sure. And what is it? And do you paint on canvas? Or
I do.
linen?
I usually use the Clausen's canvas and cotton canvas. They have that landscape canvas that I really like, and then I also use linen sometimes. So I kind of switch back and forth between the two.
Wow. What about just a word on some of those media? What is it about oil that's so attractive now?
Well, I like the richness of it. I mean, I get a very painterly quality while still staying representational, and it really lends itself to kind of loosening up a little bit and not being so tight on detail and things like that. And I'm able to, to really, give the impression of detail without, doing individual lines. And I love the forgiveness of the medium. It's very, very good for going back and, having a little, time to manipulate paint and not, because, as with acrylic or watercolor, it's an immediate drying thing.
Yeah. You're not quite so committed at the moment you put your brush on the surface.
Right, exactly.
That's nice. It's also kind of nice for viewers, I think, to have, if you're a little looser, it gives them a little more room to make their own interpretation of what it is they're seeing and how they're seeing it in some way, right? In some way.
Exactly. Because when I was doing the acrylic and the photorealism, I mean, I literally, my bird paintings, they almost look like they could be in a field guide.
Sure.
And I was at the Prida West art show in Oklahoma City just as a visitor, and I talked to an artist there, and he said, the sad thing about doing something so photorealistic is that, once you, finish the painting, basically the story's told. You look at it, and there's no room for the imagination.
Way to go, yeah.
Right, to kind of fill in the gaps and bring you in and get you involved in the painting. So I didn't really think about that too much until I actually did it, and I started getting more comments. And honestly, my work has been, a little bit more favorable to viewers now that I've been painting the way I have been than I did before.
That's a marvelous story. Isn't that a nice story of evolution a little bit? And what about, do you work out in the field? Like, do you carry your stuff right out? Looks like you do. You paint.
I do. I kind of use, all the resources that are available. I do some plein air paint outs. We just had one here in September. A bunch of us artists got together out of my gallery over in Bend, Oregon, and we all went out into the field and painted. And I do that here locally. And I'm not what you would consider a plein air painter like Matt Smith, for example.
No.
I use basically outdoor painting with plein air material as reference and research stuff. So they're basically like shorthand paintings that I can bring back to the studio, and I would consider myself a studio painter because the evolution of my painting takes a while.
That's fair enough, but hang on to those sketches though, because they could become valuable. You know what? They could. Yeah, we've got old artists in Canada whose early fieldwork sells just as well as the stuff they did when they got back their studio. High prices for small sketches.
I know. I need to keep an ongoing log of those things. I've got some that I do. Some of I'm not ashamed to say that aren't that great, but they serve me well in the studio.
Of course, yeah.
Reference.
What about how your directions? Like, is there? You talked about. You just mentioned something about evolution in your style and in your approach. Do you see that changing? How do you see that going over time as you get older, for instance? We all do.
Well, I guess that's a good question, and I think the evolution in that context is that at least I hope I'm always learning. So with that, I think the evolution can't help but take place. So if I experiment with something, for example, and I see maybe it works or it doesn't work, to me that's all part of the evolutionary process.
Sure.
Maybe something that I can eliminate. Maybe that I was curious about and hadn't tried before. Well, now I know that won't work if I've given enough of a chance to make or fail. And I see myself experimenting a little bit more, and some things are kind of exciting. They work. I'm using a lot thicker paint, for example, which is something I didn't usually find myself doing in the past, and I like doing that, and still staying with that fairly representational quality that that I'm.
Yeah.
I think my work kind of reflects.
You don't see yourself getting into impasto much.
Not to that degree.
That's
I really don't.
No.
I do like not so impressionistic. I really kind of in that walking that fine line, I guess, maybe between more realistic representation than photorealism or all out impressionism. So
Sure.
And that's kind of where I'm at. And that's right now where my work is kind of hovering.
Well, it certainly, I would, looking at things on the internet is a relatively poor substitute for looking at the real thing right in front of you. But even there, it really comes across your work. It has a major impression for sure. I love it. Can you? How do you do your marketing? Like how is it? I see that you've got a gallery, the Mockingbird Gallery, and I guess some of your stuff gets sold there. Are there other galleries, or how do you work mostly? How do you?
Well, what I've been doing, and in fact, it's funny you mentioned that. I just met this guy this morning. I was having coffee. He's very big into social networking. Excuse me, and we were talking about that. And in some ways, I can see how that could be beneficial, but in some ways, I don't see it as being very helpful in keeping sort of with that fine art mystique about things. Somehow I kind of had this thing in my mind that it somewhat cheapens the image and the mission as a fine artist, and that's just my opinion about that. But I'm not so naive to think that the social medias and social networks wouldn't be helpful. I just haven't figured out how to use them.
Yeah.
Right. That's fact. Yeah. But to answer your question, I think directly is that am with one gallery right now, and that's Mockingbird. And the reason I'm with just one right now is I'm not a very prolific painter. At least I haven't been. I'm getting better at it, and so keeping a gallery, flush with enough paintings has been a bit of a challenge for me. And so what happens is I belong to Oil Painters America, and I get my work into as many high-profile shows as I can.
Yes.
And by doing that, that somewhat does the marketing for me.
Of course, yeah. People see it and they say, I want one of those. Yeah.
Right, and in these galleries, for example, I just got into Oil Painters America's national show.
Yeah. Beautiful picture.
Insane.
What is that animal? Is that it looks like a lynx or something, but I think it's maybe just a cat, but it's beautiful. There's one of the cat-like creature lying on a table with his ears straight up and looking straight at me. Yeah.
Oh, that's one that was in a national show. That's not the one that got in this year.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, the one that I have is it's a landscape. It's a 24 by 30 landscape of an area over in Central Oregon.
Yeah.
But the one that you're looking at, that was actually a cat I had, a pet of mine. And that painting had got into a national show,
sure.
and I can't remember exactly where that one was. I think it was in Santa Fe.
That's the boldest, brassiest, well-set-up cat I ever saw. It's amazing.
Yeah, I'd say I enjoy it. In fact, as I'm talking to you, I've got it hanging on my wall right now. I kept it. It's one of my favorite paintings.
I bet. Okay.
But yeah, that's kind of what I do. Is for right now, I've just been getting into these shows. I was in the Legacy Gallery in Scottsdale. They have a salon show that they just started. They've done it for 2 years, and I've been fortunate enough to get into both of those shows.
That's great.
So they advertise that heavily, and then you can people that are interested in the show can go online and they'll see my work there as well.
Well, it's wonderful. It sounds like you're able to, they're pushing you for production. That sounds like a good, it sounds good. It sounds like you're selling what you make, right? And they're asking you for more. That's how could any artist want more than that, really?
Right, yeah.
It's very good.
And believe me, the more representation, the better. But I guess, we all, as artists, we all have our opinions on how we approach this. And I guess I want my work to kind of be, the voice and liaison between, my ability to paint, and any success that I might have. That it's the front man, the liaison between myself and any artistic success that I might have. So I'm hoping that the artwork gets the attention and any success.
Yeah, for sure.